Good morning. I'm Tim King, MAPS IT Director and your webinar producer. It is so nice to see everybody here this morning. Today's topic is both timely and sensitive. It addresses the hardships that all leaders face in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, complicated by supercharged socio-political events, and goes even further to help us recognize and manage the mental, emotional, and physical burdens of these once-in-a-lifetime conditions. We're going to hit the topic hard with honesty, objectivity, and a toolbox of solutions. Before we dive in, though, I'd like to take care of some housekeeping matters. Your webinar leader will be MAP Senior Consultant Cassie Hoag. She works with a broad spectrum of clients, providing customized management, leadership, and coaching services to individuals and teams. With experience in the construction sector, she's designed this webinar to suit the particular needs of WWCCA members and affiliates. Cassie will be supported during the Q&A portion of this webinar by my other colleague, MAP Executive Consultant, Michael Pezel. He's been a visionary and leader in our organization for several decades now and director on MAP's board. He has long served WWCCA as well as a number of its member companies. Michael's the one who introduced Cassie to the association. We currently have about 21 participants online, and others may join us shortly. For audio quality purposes, all of you are on mute. As Cassie progresses through the topic, I encourage you to use chat to pose any questions or observations. Any entries you make will go straight to me and your hosts and will be treated as anonymous. We'll be reserving time toward the end of the webinar to answer your questions. I'll be taking everyone off mute at that time in case you'd like to interact with Cassie or Michael. When I open up your mics, should you have any background noise in your location, please place yourself on mute. Otherwise, I'll need to do that for you. Cassie will be running a poll early in the webinar and again at the end. Be assured that all polling responses will be anonymous. We want you to be forthcoming. This session will be recorded for you and the association to share as appropriate. We and the association will appreciate your feedback, so when we wrap the webinar up, please remain in Zoom to answer a brief polling question. Okay, it's all systems go, everybody. I'm pleased to turn it over to our webinar leader, MAP Senior Consultant, Cassie Hoag.
Well, thanks a lot, Tim. It's good to join you today on the webinar, and I'm privileged to address this timely topic, the ultimate test of leadership, and in particular, managing stress and anxiety. Yes, we are all under the ultimate test. And in fact, this webinar is all about informing you, serving as a catalyst to your leadership approach, to improving your well-being as well as those who surround you, direct reports, peers, crews, bosses, other stakeholders. And so we are doing this with a purpose to help you in that regard and provide specific guidance. The topic, however, is about relieving stress and anxiety. So this is meant to be a relaxed session. I hope that everybody just opens their mind and starts considering all of the possibilities relative to enduring the unprecedented circumstances that we're all living under. I do encourage everybody to get a cup of coffee, some water, a beverage of your choice. Make sure you're comfortable wherever you are, and just put your mind and your full attention into this hour so that you can enjoy and appreciate. Now, that's the what. More importantly, let's look at the why. In particular, why this topic? And there's three reasons. The first, of course, very obvious. Um, we've heard it before. This is a once in a century event. These circumstances are unique. We will be a generation of leaders that will go down in history for enduring this and navigating our way through it. We are truly in uncharted waters. So there's that. We also had to overnight change everything about the way we work, or almost everything. And that persists. We are evolving, we are changing as the pandemic evolves, and we were changing as all the implications of the pandemic evolve. One of the most obvious being the economy, as well as, you know, the social implications of this profound event in our lives. So we had to change on a dime, and that's an understatement. And as leaders, the buck stops with us. And we're leaders because we do have the answers, or we do know how to source the answers. Yet in this situation, we're swimming in a sea of uncertainty. And so we're often without answers, yet we get bombarded with questions. And that's what makes this topic particularly important. And finally, it's real. Every human is suffering from some form of stress or anxiety as a result of these circumstances, and we all need some relief. So the why is most important, and the topic is timely and relevant. So let's get to this matter of exploring, understanding, guiding, informing. And our agenda is really unrolling in 5 parts. We're going to start first about the reality of the situation and some acknowledgement, some self-acknowledgement, and all of the research on this topic about relieving our stress and anxiety as leaders. So these are organizational psychologists who are studying this, say that that's the first step. We need to face our own reality. We are on the brink in some way, shape, or form. We're frustrated, or we're angry, or we're sometimes depressed, or we're sometimes elated, or we're sometimes moved emotionally by the kindness of the people who surround us. So we are frazzled, and we need to face that and understand it. And that's the first step to improving the situation, and in fact to finding our balance. And we need to do that personally before we then extend that balance to our team. And in particular, what we need to do with our team, or the people who report to us or surround us, is we need to be able to communicate early and often, more often than pre-pandemic, yet there's a whole lot of uncertainty with the messaging. So it's almost paradoxical, and we'll talk about how to solve for that. And then we'll move on to converting problems to opportunities, and that may sound a little fluffy or Pollyanna-ish. What this really means, a good way to think about this, is moving out of reactive mode, which we've had to be in because of these circumstances. We had to react. Moving out of that to a more proactive mode. That's what we're talking about here. And then lastly, as Tim mentioned, we'll be reserving time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So I'll just reiterate Tim's instruction. Do use the chat function to pose a question, and we'll keep you anonymous. So feel free to ask away, or share an observation, or share a tip. That would be awesome. And at the end of the webinar, Tim will get to as many of those questions or observations as we have time. And I'll reserve 10 minutes so we can do that. Okay, so let's look inward. And this is massive disruption, especially for leaders, massive. In fact, I started to to list some of the most common disruptors that we share. And this is just a short form of that list. And I'll give you a moment to go ahead and scan through all of these disruptors. And you'll see that many of them are on the professional side of what we do. Yet in the column on the right, you'll see about halfway down that we also address the personal side, which has been as disrupted as our professional lives. So yeah, disruption. Again, understatements. And again, we are in uncharted waters. This is unprecedented for us, for our generation, and considered a rarity and a unique experience. And we are learning as we go. That's encouraged to continue to learn as we go. And we will have wisdom beyond any scope that we anticipated as a result of making our way through. Yet again, in order to manage the stress and anxiety, we need to know when we're on the brink. We need to know when that constant state of being frazzled or with the adrenaline flowing, we need to know when it's at a boiling point. And so what I'd like to do now is to launch the poll that tests that. And as a matter of seeding for the poll, I'd like to share with you as well a matrix that the US government has prepared. The Health and Human Services Administration has been studying these effects, and they tell us that we're being affected on 4 different dimensions: our intellectual or cognitive dimension, certainly emotional, our feelings, the way we behave, which ties to the emotional, and then also on the physical side. And it's pretty sobering what they tell us about each of these dimensions and how we manifest our stress. Go ahead and read through those 4 quadrants. So it's, as I said, sobering. And I'm sure all of us, as we read one of these descriptors or several of these descriptors, go, oh yeah, I'm there, or I was there, I've been there, or I'm likely to get there. So this is all humanity that Health and Human Services is talking about here. Relative to leadership, we have a particular burden. We go ahead and amplify all of that matrix, and it has to do with our responsibilities within the organization. So the polling question is along these lines. I'd like you to think about what you've noticed about your own behaviors, your own reactions and experience as relates to your leadership. And what I will present with the question is a list of symptoms. We call it a symptom checker that are unique to leaders. And go ahead and read through them, and you can select as many that you personally have experienced. So I'll bring the poll up right now. And I believe you can see it. So go ahead and read through, and you'll find that there are 10 descriptors and indicate any that apply to you. And Tim, if you could just confirm for me that, yeah, never mind, I can see that the poll is already active. So I'll give everybody a couple minutes to answer the symptom checker. And remember, everything's anonymous here, folks. So I'm going to give everybody about another 30 seconds to weigh in. And then I'll display the results. And I'm already seeing some common threads among our participants. And you'll see them momentarily when I share the results. So another 15 seconds or so, folks. Go ahead and weigh in. Okay, so I'm going to close out the poll, and then I will share the results. So you can see these, I trust. And probably the easiest way to read this is to look at the bar, the blue bar, and look for the longest ones. So having a sense of overwhelm, 47% of you indicated that that's one of your stressors, as well as being more frustrated than usual. That's 47% of you. Likewise, 47% of you said wishing that you had more answers. So I'll make sure we spend time on that uncertainty piece of this. It's really important. The most common, the red bar, was this one, the bleak economic future. You know, every economist says at least we're in a severe recession, at least. And so we'd have our heads in the sand if we were immune to that. Even appreciating that some businesses have more demand than they can keep up with right now as a result of this pandemic. Yet most businesses are taking a hit or will take a hit in the near future. So you can see that we have true commonalities. The concerns about the economic future, then the overwhelm, frustration, and we also had wishing that I had more answers. Close behind that, though, is feeling uninspired and experiencing monotony. And I hear that quite a bit in my individual coaching practice from the leaders that I work with on an individual basis, is especially for those who are working from home most of the time, that they're feeling burdened by the monotony of it all. So I'll make sure we hit specifically on that as well. Okay, so I will go ahead and exit out of the poll, and we'll continue with our content. Thank you, everybody, for being forthcoming with that. I appreciate it. Okay. So, Tim, I trust that you've captured the results.
Yeah.
Good. Let's move on then. Okay, let's, now that we know, especially now that we know the symptoms that we share, let's talk about finding balance. And this is particularly about you. You need to be in balance in order to lead effectively. That's hard to do. Oops. Here we go. Advance to the next slide. So the balance issue is a big one, because things are constantly changing. You know, how do we deal with it? They're changing on a daily basis. You know, in particular, especially as most entities are finding their way back. Some of you, I'm sure, in your sector, you have been working and your crews have been working through the entire period, yet you've had to adopt extreme new safety protocols. And those safety protocols eat into time, they reduce productivity, there's a learning curve, and there's risk. There's risk that people might get sick. And then there's all kinds of protocols associated with that for anybody who tests positive. And certainly, then there's the heartbreaking incidents of someone who is highly symptomatic Yeah, how do you find balance when things are constantly changing? How do you lead when there are trade-offs? You know, as we said, infection, I'm sure some of you have dealt very personally with infection, whether it's someone who reports to you or a friend or a relative. You know, we're talking about human lives here. And we all noted the profound economic consequences of this pandemic, financial survival for our companies, our organizations, and for our families and people who we work with for their families, and organizational priorities versus preservation of my way of living. This is stressful, and finding that balance is hard. And lastly, serving as a role model. How do I, you know, consistently model those behaviors that are appropriate for people as individuals and appropriate for the organization or the team? These obviously are key. These are the questions that we need to answer. So I'm going to progress through 5 tips relative to balance, or 5 concepts really relative to balance. And within those concepts, there will be tips. So feel free to make notes. And by the way, this PowerPoint presentation will be available to all of you post webinar. And so you will have all of what you see, as well as the recording, as Tim mentioned. So let's talk first about balancing your mind. And psychologists tell us that we're wired to react to threats. We're animals, and you know, the hairs on the back of our necks stand literally, and when we're threatened, and the adrenaline flows. And when that happens, we react. We get into 100% react mode to the threat, or if the threat we believe is imminent, we think it's coming rather than it's here right now, then we tend to get stuck. We keep ruminating. What am I going to do? What are we going to do when this happens? And this is likely to happen. There's that. So we have really 2 choices, 2 paths when we're threatened. We can either panic, or we can practice having presence. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at the panic side of this table. When we panic, every thought we have is urgent, and that's full on 100% reactive mode. The thoughts become fearful, sometimes when it's unnecessary for them to become fearful. If we feel threatened, they just default to fear. As I mentioned, the flow of adrenaline, which can be exhausting quickly, that's panic mode. So we ought to train our minds to think with presence. And what that means is to, okay, unless you are actually physically threatened, think assessment. All right, let me just get the lay of the land. Let's all take a breath. Let's all pause and consider what's happening here. Just that alone makes a difference. That's your filter, okay? So think assessment. That's presence. I'm going to assess this. It's okay to say, let's hold up. Yeah, I'm without the answers at the moment. Let's take a look. Let's consider the pros and cons. Let's think about what's happening right now and what may happen or may not happen in the next day, the next week, or the next month. So use those filters. This comment about pushing unvalidated thoughts aside, that means if it's speculative and it has yet to be validated as truth, it's clutter. Just move on. Okay, make a mental note and move on. Do start with very short-term plans. I call them micro plans with the clients I work with. Short-term, get the right people together and talk it through. Okay, what are we going to do in the next day? What are we going to do in the next 48 hours or a week based on this, whatever this is? And then lastly, we're all advised to find a way every day to just clear the brain completely there's all kinds of different ways to do it. Some people go for a walk, just around a building or around the block. Some people turn on music and just listen. Whatever works for you. Just some people read a chapter in a novel to just take the brain completely out of the current situation. And we're always encouraged to do that, particularly now. So do it daily. Find a way to just spend, even if it's 15 minutes. Some people take a little nap. That whatever works for you, make that daily time. Then there's this second concept, and it has to do with the finger pointing, which is inevitable. It happens at every level of this condition that we're in, that has been perpetrated by COVID-19. So we can easily play that game. Sometimes we do it very subtly, sometimes we do it subconsciously, yet the words that come out reveal that we're angry or mad or disappointed in somebody or something or some organization or some phenomenon. So we need to catch ourselves doing that, even the tone, and remember that we're dependent on to be the voice of reason. So how do you do it? Here you go. When a conversation starts to go into gossip or blaming, whether you are the instigator or somebody else is, just politely redirect, nod, acknowledge, and change the direction of the conversation to something more proactive or more focused on the organization and a favorable way forward, or a person and a favorable outcome for them. Here's a great question when your team starts spiraling into that frustration and finger pointing is, okay, realistically, okay, acknowledge, and then say, yet what are our choices in this situation? And get them to start articulating what those are. Great question. It does work. I've tried it myself. And then help people get to all right, how can I provide value here? Value to the project, value to my coworkers, value to the crew, value to the people I report to, value to my customers or my vendors. Make it about serving others. There is quite a sense of a worldwide community. We're all in this together that persists. Let's tap into this. And then, of course, get others involved and invite ideas and solutions. Okay, here's our third one, and it has to do with balancing your focus. Because whatever you focus on, it expands, it amplifies, and as a leader, other people perceive it. And what we need to realize is that all the danger and sensationalism that we're exposed to daily gets our attention. It attracts focus. So we need to discipline ourselves to change our patterns enough to at least focus on one positive or favorable thing every day. And it could be in your personal life or your professional life. So here's our tips. In the table, you can see that talking about it is really important. In fact, if you find yourself drawn to the unfavorable as a result of news or a new guideline from the CDC or a change in a safety protocol that's very frustrating, or maybe somebody just tested positive, scan the same sources, whether it's news or it's internal messaging, etc. Scan it carefully and pick out what's right. Sometimes hard to find, yet there's gems in there. Pick out what's right and talk about those things. Do identify the silver linings. One that most of us feel pretty good about is since stay-at-home mandates were enforced and now they're being lifted, yet a lot of people are working remotely still. And so the traffic's a lot lighter. It's a lot lighter, and that's a silver lining. We hope that that persists. We hope that many workers are able to stay at home, avoid the commute, be real productive, and give the rest of us on the road a little bit faster way to get from point A to point B. So that's a silver lining, and I'm sure you've observed others. And then as you talk, enlist people in your favorable direction. Get them signed up. This 30-minute sprints thing has to do with whatever you're working on, developing a plan, managing a project, preparing reports. We're advised to isolate ourselves in 30-minute increments. When I say isolate, you got to turn off all the dings and whistles and pings on all your devices, put them away, set a timer, and just go at that task or that responsibility for 30 minutes. And that helps you sharpen your focus on the right stuff. It's really easy to be distracted, and we're all on call for obvious reasons, yet 30 minutes has been found to be adequate to take yourself off the grid and get things done. And then journaling also has been valuable to certain leaders. And just pretend that you've been given an assignment, that you're part of a course, and you've been given an assignment to actually write down, just make a list of things that you can control today. And then of those, where should you take some decisive action? And that helps you prioritize, at least in the next 24-hour period. So here's number 4, tip number 4, concept number 4, relative to your emotions. And we get angry, we get frustrated, we get angry for every good reason. And we're advised to turn the anger into awareness. It's going to be there. Here's our tips. First of all, just like the symptoms that you just revealed in the symptom checker, think in particular about anger and frustration. When you believe you've overreacted, or maybe other people have told you, maybe you overreacted. What were the feelings and behaviors that existed at that point? Sometimes you're going to get to a root cause that surprises you. So that awareness will help you in and of itself. And then realize that anger is energy. So that might be good. If you can recognize anger when it flares, or intense frustration when it flares, point it at a positive purpose, go to that focus concept, and that will channel all that energy, capture it and put it in the right bucket, so to speak. And then this concept of creating space, that sounds a little esoteric. What it means is that give yourself time. Time to process and understand, assess, filter, etc. That's what space means. To open up and provide enough time for you, for your people, to really get your arms around something to the extent that you can, to the extent possible. Particularly when you're angry and your instinct is to lash out at somebody or something. Use the 24-hour rule, sleep on it, and I can guarantee you, and you probably all experienced that your reaction will change somewhat, and it will probably be improved versus your knee-jerk. And then the 5th concept, when it comes to balance, has to do with your response to a situation. We're advised to give ourselves a break, to accept that we have to be responsive, and usually we have to be responsive in the moment or within a very short time, and that we do, even sometimes when we think we don't, have some choices. So here are tips. Just go with it. Tension and anxiety will happen to you. If it has yet to happen to you, then it's going to erupt. It will happen. So instead of just trying to bury it or hope it will go away, just accept it. Okay, yeah, it's going to happen. By the way, when you do that, you anticipate it and you're able to invoke the other tips. Stop trying to be as great as you were before the pandemic with everything. The world has changed, as we observed, on a dime. So you're going to get more done. You're going to feel better if you just do something good enough. That's okay. You know what? You can always come back and make it even better. And once we get beyond this, then go back being, super great you with the bar really high. It's okay to move the bar down right now. And then again, choices. If it's a volatile situation, consider at least one more path than that which may seem obvious. Choices help. They actually soothe your anxiety. Even if you just spend 30 seconds thinking about an alternative and go, I'm going to stick with my initial reaction. It actually has a calming effect on the mind and the behavior. So make sure that you always have a choice. And if you're scratching your head and you're thinking, oh, this is bad and there's just only one way to go, then source it with somebody you trust, a peer or a colleague, a family member, a friend. Just run it by them, because I'll bet they'll think of another way. Even if you reject it, it's going to have a positive impact on you. So let's move on then and get to this matter of uncertainty, because this was important. This emerged out of our symptom checker, our polling question. You need to be the rock, yet you're often without answers. And so let's look at that. We have a default position, and it's a good one when organizational change needs to take place. It's a good one. We've honed it. We're committed to it. And here it is. Here's our default. It's holding off on messaging until we have our arms around this change. We know how it's going to play out. And then we can message to the affected stakeholders or those who will be affected. That's our default for every good reason. That's our default. Yet guess what? We got to change our thinking, because that fails to work under these conditions. And in fact, might be the root of much of our sense of frustration or overwhelm. Many of you said overwhelm with the symptom checker. So that's interesting. We got to break through this paradigm and change, flip it 180 degrees. Okay. So I do have several concepts to share with you here. And the first one has to do with probabilities. So we need to communicate more often than we did before the pandemic. And I've said that before, I'm saying it again. Research supports this. And those of you on this webinar, you're interested in this topic, so you've probably already read some of the studies that have been reported in blogs and news posts and so forth. And they're scary, because they say, as leaders, we need to touch base more often. We need to check in more frequently. We need to communicate our brains out. Yeah, we do. That in and of itself creates a sense of overwhelm. Yet we should be thinking about probabilities, and that will help us because we should be forthcoming and share the concerns, share the outlook, share the problems, share the issues and challenges. And as I said, a 180-degree flip on our default position and just lay it all out there and say, hey, everybody, this is where we are today. And this is all we know right now. Just wanted to let you know what I'm thinking. That relieves quite a burden in communication, just to say that. Here's where we are, and maybe do it daily. Here's where we are, and this is all I know. Okay. Also, with this is all we know, people sometimes want to hear about what might occur, how it might be addressed, what they might face, particularly if they believe it might threaten them or change the way they work, then it's okay. It's absolutely okay to talk about the possibilities or the likelihoods or the odds even of something happening. In fact, get everybody involved in that conversation. It's unnecessary to say, okay, Joe, you do this, and Susan, you do that, and we'll expect you to report back on these dates. It's unnecessary to do that. I'm an accountability coach, and this is kind of hard for me to kind of abandon the specificity with the action item and the responsible party and when it's due. Yet I've been using it, and it's gotten me further because it's such a fluid environment. And to that point, make the best of meetings or gatherings or just informal group discussions. Go ahead and think out loud and plan in the moment and act, at the same time. And realize that you'll get more done that way than if you go back to your default position and try to get all your ducks in a row, because your ducks are going to keep, flying away and replaced by new species. So go ahead and just, be more of an in the moment collaborator with less discipline and structure around it. I know it feels funny to those of us who have been successful as leaders for a long time, yet it's proven effective. Okay, our next concept here is about communicating to engage. And here what we're advised to do is back off on, the big picture, unless it's particularly relevant to the people who we're leading. Just back off on the big picture, the vision, the goals and strategies. Think about what affects them, your employees or your customers or your other stakeholders, your crews. What immediately affects them, and that's what you need to communicate about much more often than the grand scheme of things. So our table here is one that tells us what to do more of when we communicate to engage versus what we should peel back on and do less of. And you'll see that, again, we need to keep talking about how, especially with employees, how their jobs fit and matter today or this hour or this week. We just need to keep talking about that. And also identifying their problems and their needs, and then with them sourcing solutions. They often have better ideas than we do. And then catching them doing things right. And, just that small recognition and reinforcement helps a lot, especially because so much has changed and we're asking them to do things differently. So as soon as they do, give them a high five in some way, shape, or form. And then on the flip side, the do less of, it's the opposite, okay? The executive level activities and processes, they really want to focus on them for every good reason, so that's unnecessary. Again, being the person with all the answers, yeah, you usually have been, yet you're blinded as to the future to a large degree. You may have more insight and certainly be more on top of information. You're attending this webinar, okay, yet you still are unable to answer a lot of important questions. And then certainly, avoid beating them up as they navigate change and they suffer the stressors and the anxiety in a different way, yet they're suffering too. Our next concept has to do with burnout. And we're vulnerable to burnout, and all of our people are too. Some of them may have burned out already, and you'll see that in that they'll need to take time off, or they'll blow up on the job, or they'll stop working at a level that you're used to seeing from them. Burnout is likely under these conditions. So we need to recast our approach in this regard. And here's your tips. Keep linking your people and yourself to their purpose or your purpose. You know, why are we doing what we're doing today? And the answer, go to the good reasons why you're doing what you're doing. And if there's only bad reasons, then change what you're doing or what they're doing. Frequently just tell them you're committed to them and you trust them. And be genuine. If that's the case, you'd say it a lot. And reinforce what they have the autonomy to do. Even if they're small things, reinforce that for them. Do have them articulate, think about their triumphs and their successes, even if it's just, hey, we got through that protocol well today. Celebrate it. So have an end of the day huddle and say that, you know, what went well today. And you see here, list and publish. Somebody should just capture those, maybe make a recording with the phone, with your mobile phone, or somebody can type it into a device or write it on a journal. It's important to record and publish those small successes and triumphs and then play them back, because people will gain strength from that. And then slip into your coaching hat more often, as well as mentoring and advocating for them and yourself. Connect people to other people with similar struggles. That's a great way to be a coach and an advocate. Do provide access to new resources and new opportunities. Keep thinking deliberately about those things, and you will be better at keeping them engaged and communicating effectively. And research tells us that if you do these three things, you are much more likely to keep them in the game and prevent burnout. And then the last concept in this section, it has to do with hearing, listening. And in fact, we have a graphic here as well that came from a university setting. You know, the truth of this is that there's uncertainty. And so by virtue of the uncertainty, we need to invite more conversations and listen harder. And by the way, when we do that, it relieves some of our own stress. So you can see the four components of the matrix. Listen in different ways, maybe a virtual meeting like Zoom, maybe a stand-up huddle. You can listen even in written form. Everybody contribute to this Google Sheet or this Google form. Send in your ideas, email, whatever, tons of different ways. Slack. Use different modalities. Report the progress on any issue or matter that the team shares. And you can use multiple modalities for that. When you ask for feedback, you got to take action on something, make it visible, let people know that you're taking the action. Sometimes they're unaware, and it's really important just to say, hey, we did that, or you did that, or they did that. And then repeat all of this in both your one-on-one meetings with those in your circle, as well as widely across your team or maybe even your company. So the last concept here is this translation of problems to opportunities. And as I said, think of it as going from reacting to being proactive, finding your way forward. And we set the stage here in order to move our orientation to the solution side of the equation. And there's some tips here. A good way to set the stage is to sometimes just take an entire meeting slot and make it personal. Ask people how they're holding up. How are you doing personally? You can take a whole meeting to do that. And some of you have probably done it, and it's moving. It's moving because people do open up, and you'll learn more about each other, and you'll connect better. And in fact, it will get you closer to a solution orientation. Share how you've changed your expectations. What this means is let them know that you no longer expect them to hit target X, because given the situation that we have to follow these intense safety protocols on the job, for example, then you're going to be less productive. So you're lowering the bar. Let them know that. It's important to let them know that. And then, keep soliciting, asking them, as well as picking your own brain and those of people who are close to you about different ways to do check-ins and team meetings. The monotony, you mentioned that before, and we got to break through that. And then opening up to the tough stuff. Okay, you can see this statement. Okay, if you're wondering about them having all these concerns, stop wondering, because they are. And then this table tells us to acknowledge, let them know you're paying attention to these issues, be flexible, redistribute work and or responsibility and or concerns, and shepherding and nurturing, demonstrate that you care, host safe discussions, make sure people have a vehicle to talk about the things they want to talk about. If appropriate, develop a formal response for your team or for your company, and take care of yourself. And you'll be able to dive into each of these 6 tips differently. So, you need to have your own toolkit. You need to take care of yourself. And it's about all of these things, folks. Knowing triggers and patterns, and setting your own boundaries, and having a way to clear your head, knowing that we're going to keep doing this for a long time. This is more than a sprint. Being honest with yourself and with others, and creating that space and refueling so you can keep doing this. So with that, let me turn it over to Tim with questions. And Michael Pezel, my colleague, if you turn on your webcam and your mic. And Tim, what have you got for us? Anything in the chat?
Yes, let's see here. Yes, okay, so here is a question regarding your point about uncertainty. Is it okay to just plainly state, I don't know?
Yeah, it is. Pre-pandemic, I would say, it's better to say I'm unfamiliar with that. And if you like those words, that's fine. Yet it's absolutely okay to say, I don't know. Just plainly say it. I would recommend, though, that you then say, the only piece of that I have any visibility to is this. And it might be just restating the question. Or you might say, I understand that we may know more about that next week. So just give them something more than the I don't know. Give them an acknowledgement of how you think it might be evident, or even I don't know, and I think it's best for us to focus on something else. Yet just leave it, give it more than just hanging. So I hope that's helpful. By the way, for those of you who ask or who are posing the question, you're welcome to turn on your mic and ask me or ask Michael personally to elaborate further. So Tim, do you have anything else?
Let's see here. Yes. How should I say how I feel about something that's polarizing? For example, like wearing face masks without offending some people.
Yeah. Now that question's a really good one. And I actually, some of the leaders who I coach have brought that to my attention, and I had to research it in order to get to an answer. And what I came up with was, it's okay to share how you feel. Let's say you're someone who believes that as long as we have social distance, it's unnecessary to wear a face mask. It's quite uncomfortable and you want to be able to communicate a lot, and the face mask is quite inhibiting. Well, you know what? We're advised to just go ahead and say that, yet say it with empathy. So say just what, if you feel that way about face masks, say, I feel this way about face masks. Go on though and say, yet I understand, I fully understand that there's a spectrum of beliefs about this, or whatever words work for you. Just say, I fully understand that. And that's all you need to say. The researchers, the psychologists, the organizational behaviorists say that we will earn more trust and respect if we do say how we feel. Just be careful to avoid any finger pointing or blame, and say how you feel and how you respect that there are other views. So, Michael, do you have anything to add on that one? That's a tough one. You may be on mute.
Yes, Michael, you'll need to unmute your microphone, please.
I try to mute it for him.
All right. Well, in the interest of time, Tim, do you have something else?
Sure, I've got, let's see. My company is unwilling to dial back goals, and people are afraid that they'll lose their bonuses. How should I handle that?
Don't expect a bonus this year.
Yeah, okay. Well, again, we invite further comment. This is a common question. And the answer is, as a leader, do continue to work with your peers. And if you report to somebody, find good opportunities to talk to that person about the reality. Maybe share some of the tips from this webinar. And as the pandemic continues to unfold and we start to get a flavor for the economic impacts on our business, people tend to change their position, particularly other leaders. And then there can be a dialogue about, okay, especially relative to the bonuses, okay, there is an undercurrent of fear amongst a certain group of people or all our employees because they've been receiving bonuses for the last 4 years, and now it's pretty evident that they will be out of the money, and so you got to decide what to do about that. And maybe it's dialing it back, or maybe it's
proud. It's beautiful.
We do have some background noise, folks. Somebody's having a conversation, thanks. Or maybe it's that we are just realizing we'll be unable to pay the bonuses. Then talk about, how to message that and go ahead and start the conversation. And to the point that we need to communicate uncertainty, it's quite all right to say to people, I know you're concerned about the bonuses. And if you are too, say that. Well, I share your concern. And here's what I can tell you, that we know we need to address it. We know that we need to respond to you, and we will probably be able to do that in this time frame. And just keep them aware and keep caring. And the more you talk about that, even when you're still figuring it out, the better. The better. Rather than inflaming their fears, you're just acknowledging their fears and you're letting them know that you care. Hey, Michael, that one might be, your insights might be helpful on that one too.
I think you handled it pretty well. I finally figured out the unmute. So, but no, I think you did very well on that. Thank you.
Okay. Tim, do we have time for one more?
Unfortunately, we do not.
Okay.
We are at the hour, so it is 10 o'clock.
Okay, great. Well, then let's go ahead and wrap up. what I am happy to share with you is the contact information for Michael and for me. And we welcome any of you to contact us directly. And we also encourage you to reach out to Albert and the association, Albert, who has been the inspiration behind our topic today. You know, I'm going to close with this quote from a famed psychologist or psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl. And between stimulus and response, there is a space. And man, are we experiencing stimulus and response on steroids, right? Yet take comfort that there is space. And in that space is our power to make choices, as we talked about, and choose how we respond and make it more relaxed and more collaborative. And that will relieve some of your stress and anxiety. And when you can do that, then you can, in spite of these profoundly difficult conditions, you can grow as a leader and experience more freedom in that growth. So thank you, everybody. Now, I do want you to stay online. I'm going to launch our last poll. Just want your feedback about the webinar. So we are grateful for you going ahead and completing this poll. It's one question. And we will be able to, we will benefit from your feedback. It's just one question. So go ahead and read through, choose one selection. And thanks, everybody. I'm going to sign off. I thank Albert. I thank Michael and Tim. Thanks for producing for us and all of you as participants. I look forward to hearing from you. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Alfred. I also offer my thanks as well. And, you know, as a producer, I applaud your obvious ease with the technology, and you asked some great questions. I know personally I'll also benefit from some of those answers. As we wrap up, please be reminded that the PowerPoint presentation that supported today's webinar will be available from the association or directly from Cassie or Michael. And on behalf of the association, we've recorded the webinar, and that will be made available for you to share appropriately within the WWCCA community. Cassie and Michael welcome your direct contact with any further questions or needs regarding today's topic or any other leadership and management challenges that you're facing. Their contact details are displayed below the quote on your screen. And lastly, MAP values your feedback, as does WWCCA. Please stay in the Zoom for a brief minute or so to answer our post-webinar polling question. With that, I'll exit. Thanks again, and everyone have a great rest of your day.